Hi friends, welcome back to the show. I'm going to do a short Q&A episode today covering two different topics that I think have a little bit of overlap. And they are questions I've gotten over the course of the past couple of like Q&As that I've done on Instagram stories. So the first one is basically, Holly, how does fiber fit into my diet? I know I'm supposed to be eating fiber, but I feel like I can't tolerate fiber when I'm running such high mileage all the time, or I've been told that I should cut out fiber when I'm trying to focus on eating enough carbohydrates. And are there any like side effects or negatives to this? So they kind of want you guys kind of want my insight on fiber, especially because I do think it's getting more attention on like TikTok and stuff right now, just like protein. So I'll answer that question. And then the second question is, are food sensitivity tests legit? Especially like, the ones that you do at home or that you might have gotten sent by like a naturopath or a different third-party provider. So we're gonna answer these. These are really great questions. So the first kind of like, how does fiber fit in? So generically, for Americans, we recommend that women get at least 25 grams of fiber per day and men get at least 38 grams of fiber per day. I tend to see like those are good minimums, which is what the country sees too. But for some specific goals and some people, even more can be helpful. I tend to see two types of people when they come to me with digestive issues or they're working on fueling. I see people who are nowhere near meeting their fiber minimums, like they're getting 10, 15, 20 grams a day, and that's just not enough. Or I see people who are getting so much fiber, like they're at 60 grams per day, and that's negatively impacting them as well. So a lot of the times when that's happening, it's the person who is, maybe kind of like obsessing over healthy foods or trying to do a lot of clean eating or only eating fruits and vegetables, or they're trying to fill up on high volume foods that are low in calories, or they're in an eating disorder pattern, or they've been in like a restricted mindset in the past and they're afraid to eat like calorie dense foods, so they load up on fiber. Um, so that's kind of those are the two people I tend to see in practice. And then I do see quite a few too who are like right where they should be in terms of fiber needs. Um, so to kind of go about answering this question, I just think that like recommendation and context is helpful because runners oftentimes on like this podcast, and all of the other channels you may be getting sports nutrition information from, I think a lot of the times there is an emphasis on, make sure you're not having too much fiber right before you go out for a run, or make sure you're not eating too much fiber before your race. Or if you are training for a marathon, make sure, you're reducing your fiber to reduce GI distress and that type of thing. And I also think a lot of us emphasize, hey, runners have a lot of like different nutrition recommendations compared to the general sedentary population. Like there's different reference ranges for runners on certain things, and different dietary recommendations for certain things. Fiber is not really one of those. Okay. So, what I do want to emphasize here is that fiber is really important. It's not that we need to eat, yeah, 60 grams of fiber in a day. That's not good for us either. But having like an adequate and appropriate amount of fiber intake is really important for just our overall health, as a human. And adding running on top of that can sometimes complicate things because of the excessive nature of what's seen as normal, in the Instagram running culture world that we have. So I'll explain a little bit more. If it is really hard for you to eat foods that have fiber, so if you just don't really tolerate fiber that well, like fruits, vegetables, beans and lentils, whole grains, you're just like, "Ah, I don't really tolerate those things well." It's not just like I had a kale salad with Brussels sprouts on it and some fruit and like some bean, like that would produce gas and some symptoms in most people because it's like several of those things. But if you're just like, yeah, like I can't have a side salad, or, if there's even like some beans on like my chili, like that really throws me off, or I'm really like hyper vigilant about avoiding fibrous foods because I know that I really don't tolerate them. I can never do like oatmeal or like those types of things. That's typically a red flag. that we got some deeper digging to do when it comes to your gut health, because that is typically a sign that either we've got some overgrowth dysbiosis, where there's bacteria growing too much in places that they shouldn't be, and that could be because of stress, overtraining, underfueling, other infections, poor stomach acid, poor immune function, et cetera, et cetera. It could be from undergrowth dysbiosis, where your body's just not really digesting food that well because its microbiome is just not very abundant. And that can also be because of those things too. So if this resonates, go check out, just like scroll a couple episodes back and check out my top reasons runners have GI issues episode, because I think that will be really helpful. And I do talk more about like how I help runners with this in that episode. So if you can't tolerate any fiber, that's typically a red flag. Now, if you're kind of wondering how to incorporate sports nutrition recommendations as a runner, now we shouldn't be training for marathons all the time. You've heard me say this a lot. And I think what's normalized in our endurance athlete culture is like we have a bit of a warped sense of what like a normal amount of exercise entails. Like, again, I get it. I've been there, myself included, because we do so much exercise to train for our sport of choice. Like, you can't just sign up. People do it, but you shouldn't just sign up for a marathon and not train for it. Like, you can't just like cheat training for a marathon. Like, you have to do the training to perform well on race day. So there typically is a large amount of training and dedication that comes with this sport. Now, what people get wrong is when they start training for multiple races, multiple marathons per year, marathon in the spring, marathon in the fall, marathon in the spring, marathon in the fall, miss my BQ. So I got to run another marathon in the fall, year after year after year. We're not supposed to be in heavy training like that all the time. Another thing that running culture gets wrong is lack of off seasons. I recommend my clients, for the most part, take 1 to 2 weeks off at least every 6 months, even if they don't have anything on the calendar. This is just really helpful for your body's recovery, to help support your central nervous system in a different way, to remind you that you're more than just running, and you need extra tools in your toolbox to support your mental health, to support your physical health, to be a human, and also to give your body a little bit of a break too, just from the high intensity, high impact nature of running. So that's just the minimum, right? Like, if we did train for stuff, we also probably need a little bit of an extended off season to recover properly from that bout of running. And it doesn't mean that, oh, we need to take like a month off of running completely, but it might mean we take 2 weeks off after the marathon. We take 2 weeks to kind of like get back into things, see how the body feels after the marathon, get moving again. And we're probably training at a reduced capacity for another 2 to 3 weeks. And all of a sudden, this was like a 6 week period of time where we really weren't doing a whole lot. And that is normal. That is fine. And then to push it even further, then what we're probably doing, what I do with a lot of my clients is, and myself, is we are not jumping back into a marathon training cycle with a ton of volume. Like, we're jumping into maybe a 5K training cycle or a half marathon training cycle, or we are focusing on adding in a third or fourth strength training day and reducing our mileage a little bit and hanging out at like 20 miles per week instead of 40. Or maybe we are just going to focus on building volume, but we're not really training hard for anything. We don't have a ton of intensity or quality sessions. And there's no stress of having like a race on the calendar. So this is going to give you more flexibility to just be a human and be able to meet your fiber needs without it really throwing your body off. Because if we are always at a really high volume of training, yeah, we are going to have to eat a lot of carbohydrates. And if you're someone who really struggles to get that down, that's a red flag that we shouldn't be training at this high volume all the time. Like, we have some digging to do to figure out like why we're having trouble with our appetite or trouble getting in enough food down to support our body's energy needs. And that's a sign to take a step off the hamster wheel, even if it's scary. And if you're in good health and you're training at a volume that is appropriate for your nervous system and your responsibilities and everything that you have to handle right now as a human, it shouldn't be hard to meet your fiber needs. You should be able to meet your fiber needs without having adverse effects. You should be able to meet those 25 gram to 38 gram fiber per day need minimums. No problem. Again, and I'm speaking from professional and personal experience. My clients who have done the work to make sure their central nervous systems are well regulated, make sure their bodies are feeling safe and well nourished, they're eating enough consistently all the time, they're taking rest day or days every single week. They are having deload weeks in their training. They're having appropriate off seasons. They're not training for multiple marathons per year, year after year after year. They can meet their fiber needs no problem, exceed them without having adverse effects. Now, that's not always true if you are on the hamster wheel. So if you do need help getting off of the hamster wheel, that is something we help you with. So typically how I bump people's fiber needs up over time is we, again, take away the stimulus that is just really irritating GI symptoms, or we get to the root cause of why we're having GI symptoms and start to address the plumbing. And the mechanisms behind why that issue is there in the first place. I never have just a go in and kill infections type of protocol. Like, I want to know why it's there in the first place and really support the system to do its job effectively, how it's supposed to work, and address, of course, any other individualized needs as well, which I talk about in that GI symptom episode that I mentioned previously. And we are going to slowly increase your tolerance to fiber over time. We're going to slowly increase your overall food over time, because food with fiber in it tends to come from carbohydrates. And that's something I find a lot of runners struggle with, is meeting their carbohydrate needs. So this is something that we're addressing over time. We're always going for a slow increase in tolerance over time. I'm never just like doubling someone's fiber intake and saying good luck, because that's not going to go well. We're working on hydration, including electrolytes and fluids. When we increase fiber intake slowly over time, we are going for a variety of different fiber. So soluble fiber, insoluble fiber from all different types of food groups. We're not just like supplementing with a supplement. That's just not what we do long term for most people. So hopefully this helps answer that question. The answer is essentially fiber should fit in, and it shouldn't be that challenging if you are balancing your training, your overall fueling, you're meeting your carbohydrate needs, and you're recovering well from that training appropriately. If you're not, if you're really struggling to meet your needs, you're struggling with your appetite, feeling bleh, or you have like injuries or nutrient deficiencies, or you have a lot of GI issues, that's a sign that we got some deeper digging to do. We probably do need to like back off training a little bit at least, or reevaluate our big picture so that we are taking the appropriate path to meet your long-term goals. Because I want you to perform awesome. Like, I want you to qualify for Boston if that's your goal. Like, I want you to break 3 hours in the marathon, 5 hours in the marathon, whatever it is, if that's your goal. But we may need to reevaluate our path so that it actually happens for you and your health doesn't suffer as a consequence. Next question. Are food sensitivity tests legit? The short answer, no. What if I just ended the podcast there? But no, the Everlywell, the food sensitivity tests that are IgG mediated tests, so they test for IgG in the sample, these are not useful. They're not backed by research. They're not something I ever use in practice. In fact, I discourage their use. When we are measuring IgG, so that's IgG as in gamma, we are measuring basically something that shows up in your body when you have been exposed to a food. So say you eat peanut butter, and then basically IgG is like, you ate peanut butter, so I'm going to show up just because it's proof that you ate peanut butter. It's not an alarm system. It's not a problem. It's not something that research supports measuring at all. It's kind of like going and saying, is water wet? Yes, it's wet. Is that a problem? I mean, usually no, if water is where it's supposed to be. So, what's more useful than a food sensitivity test that's measuring IgG antibodies is a IgE, E like echo, test. This is something you would typically do with an allergist, and this is going to measure a true like immune response that's inappropriate, that's not good to a specific food. So if you have a peanut allergy and you eat peanut butter, your body's gonna increase, IgE production to be like peanut butter, bad, attack it, like basically bring out the pitchforks for peanut butter. This is not supposed to be here, and we're having a whole body reaction. Not good. Like, yes, that is something that is evidence-based that we can be measuring for, typically with an allergist, with a doctor who is an expert in this, to receive the appropriate treatment, which may be like an immunotype therapy and allergy shots. It might be avoiding that food completely and getting an EpiPen if it's a really severe reaction. And it might also be doing micro exposures, but that's typically something, again, you want to discuss with an allergist. So IgG is just measuring that you had the food, not that it was a problem that you had the food. And that's what food sensitivity tests use. So when this happens, a lot of the times what happens to people when they take these tests is you get back the results and it basically says you have a mild to severe sensitivity to all the foods that you habitually consume every day. And probably more severe the more you consume it. And sometimes people get confused because they'll be like, I got this sensitivity that was really severe to something I don't even think I've ever had, like some random type of like fish or something. A lot of the times that could be because that is an ingredient and a natural flavor of a product that you consume all the time. It could be that it's an ingredient in a color, that's a dye in a food that you consume all the time. So again, sometimes those types of things are in the food you're consuming all the time. You just may not really know it because it's not obvious. That's not to scare you or anything. Because again, this test isn't measuring if you can tolerate that food. It's measuring that you had the food. So a lot of the times people will get back these tests and they have this long list of foods that they're quote unquote sensitive to and aren't supposed to eat anymore. And what happens from my perspective is then this person is either going to restrict the heck out of their diet and cause a lot more problems, because we know that the more we restrict our diet, the worse this is for our gut health and our overall health and our mental health. We're probably going to restrict micronutrients. We might end up with deficiencies. We're going to probably restrict macronutrients because we're running out of safe foods that we can eat. And I also see this, unfortunately, trigger a lot of disordered eating and eating disorders in people as well. And that's harmful. That's not harmless. And it's definitely not helpful or therapeutic in any way. So don't recommend these tests. What I do recommend instead, if you're like, well, I feel like I poorly tolerate foods, I've got a lot of GI issues, or I just don't feel like myself, or I'm having trouble like pinpointing when I feel bad after I eat certain foods. So what am I supposed to do instead? IgE testing can be helpful if you think you have an actual like allergy to a food. You can also do like tolerance testing. So this is typically done via breath test or blood test, or even just by like experimental exposures and reactions. And this is typically done with a GI doctor, and a dietitian should also be on your team if you're doing these things. That's not always the case, but it should be. You could also do a functional stool test. That's going to test your digestive capacity, and it could also give you an inkling on why you may be reacting to certain foods and whether or not that is something that you should continue to avoid. Working with a very experienced professional who's qualified to go over this test with you. So that's what I would recommend instead. If you feel like you want more, because you're like, I have some symptoms and I just want to understand why or where to go from here, I do highly encourage you to scroll back a few episodes, check out the gut health, GI symptoms episode, why runners have GI symptoms, just from a couple of weeks ago. And check out that episode because it's a lot more in depth, and I do discuss this a lot more in depth, just like how it's all connected and how it all works. And if you've been to the doctor or you've done the food sensitivity test and you're just like stuck, or you were told to just take Miralax and fiber gummies forever, or that there's nothing wrong with you, or you have IBS, we don't know. There's help for you and you can feel better, and I want to help you. So go check out that episode. You can also check out the show notes, because I do have some options for working with me on this. If you do have GI symptoms, you can work with us one-on-one, me and Coach Erica. We love helping people meet their fiber needs. We love helping people manage their gut health. I also do have some functional testing packages available. So if you feel like you're a more complex case and you want to do like a stool test, or you want to even just reach out to me to see, hey, based off of like my background, do you think I'd be a good candidate for a stool test? That's something that I offer as well. So all of that information is linked in the show notes if you want to go check it out. But I hope this was helpful. Please always continue to participate in the Q&As when I do them on Instagram, because sometimes I can't answer them just like in a single story slide on social media, and they require a little bit of a longer explanation. But then I can come here on the podcast and answer your questions instead. So hope this was helpful. Until next time, happy running and happy fueling.